Green Lantern Show. My name's Joey, and I'm joined by Paul.
All right, mate.
And by Laurie.
All right, Joey.
How is everyone? Are we still going up? We're still going up, right?
We're ambling our way in that direction.
Very, very slowly. It's a bit like the tortoise and the moment, isn't it?
I don't care that we're not going up. I'm now just committed to saying we're going up until it's mathematically, not just mathematically impossible, but mathematically impossible even when you factor in points deductions and acts of God or whatever like that. So really it's going to have to be, like, literally the first game of next season is the point where I'm going to be off the we're going up bandwagon.
Sure, I said to my mate, look at the championship relegation battle, looking quite tasty, isn't it? Like, who do you fancy out of that? And he was like, what are you on about, mate? You're looking at the wrong division. Who's coming down from the Prem? That's what I care about. And I was like, oh, I see. Yeah, you're an idiot.
Classic. Moments of the week. Paul?
Well, I've only just looked at the highlights. So my moment of the week was I went on a stag do over the weekend, and my mate who comes from Stratford had quite a few lads there who were Villa fans. So we found where we were staying, there was a small handball pitch, and we played Cov versus Villa, and we absolutely mullered them. Like, in the end, we won by like 5 goals, because that was a bit like, we need to call it a day now after about an hour of playing in the hot sun, having drank way too much. But yeah, it was continually scoring goals against a team that were normally Villa supporters, was my moment of the week.
That's rock solid. Noel Whelan would have been delighted.
Oh God, it had everything. That weekend would have been. That probably was his Coventry career. To be honest,
yeah, laid it into Villa, getting absolutely hammered. The Noel Whelan story. Nice work, Laurie. Your moment of the week.
Well, I was undecided about whether to go to the Barnsley game for the whole week. I hadn't really bought a ticket. I said that I was going to go if we beat Oxford, and then obviously we lost. So I made a pretty late decision to go, and I think my moment of the week was Hawula's goal, just because at that moment I was like, the day is not completely wasted now. We're actually semi-involved in this game for at least the next 4 or 5 minutes, even if we now lose 5-1, which looked like quite possible at that point. So yeah, and we were so far away from it. It's one of those ones where you only really know you've scored because he runs away from the goal and everyone jumps on him. And yeah, that was an excellent moment to realise that it wasn't 9 hours in the car for no reason.
Why were you in the car?
Because the train was about £1 million. And I mean, I love the train, but there is a line in the sand to be drawn when I just don't understand sometimes the difference in price. Like Doncaster's 25 quid and Barnsley's 70. Just doesn't make any sense.
It's not fair, is it?
It's not fair at all.
I can't work out what trains should cost either, because I've just paid 50 quid to get to Sunderland, and I sort of begrudged paying it, but then it is a 3-hour train journey there and back. I sort of think, is that what a train costs? That does feel expensive to me. What do you guys think?
But 50 quid's about my limit. Anything above that, I start feeling extremely angry. But yeah, like you say, it's a long way to go, and it's a very comfortable way to travel normally. So 25 quid to go 3 hours in a train, fine. But it's something about that, getting closer to 100 quid than to 0 quid. That's what I don't like.
It's the fact that you're paying it to go somewhere rubbish for a day. It's just
for 2 hours normally.
Ludicrous. You kind of get there, have one drink, watch one shit football match, and then come home. You're kind of where is this money gone? I guess that's not the train company's fault. I wanted to make moment of the week. Just a thank you to everyone who voted for us in the Football Blogging Awards. My guess is that we probably sat on it for too long and left it a bit late, but that's not to say that the votes aren't phenomenally welcome and appreciated from everybody, and we'll see how we get on. And yeah, that's that. Right, so in total, wasn't a total waste of time then, Loz?
No, it wasn't at all. Especially because I had such bad memories of going there in the past. I was with you two, actually, and it was the final, what seemed like the final nail in that Mowbray season when I think we were in the process of switching places with Barnsley. Barnsley were on an incredible run. We were on a stinking run. I think they went on to get promoted that season.
They
didn't
did, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they'd come from like the relegation spots and just gone absolutely wild. And they deleted us 2-0, but it could have been like 4 or 5. It was just, there was no contest. It was pissing it with rain.
That game was very funny, wasn't it? Because actually, I don't think it could have been 4 or 5. I think it could have been 2-0. What was so depressing about it was how comprehensively 2-0 it was. I seem to remember that actually, had we have bothered to shown up even ever so slightly, we would have had a good go at them. But that we just weren't there, and that they were able to kind of just sort of amble past us 2-0. And that it was, I remember John Fleck. I thought John Fleck was really poor that day. I think, Paul, we had a long argument about the sort of the whys and wherefores, but it was just the team had stopped clicking entirely. I thought that was a very, very, very bad day. I actually thought that was the first nail in his coffin rather than the final nail in his coffin. I thought that was the point where you kind of went, this isn't a blip. You've just messed this season up grotesquely.
That's why he went for Stephen Hunt, wasn't it? Stephen Hunt was playing because he'd got rid of Jim O'Brien and like the whole shit stuff. It was when he was continually playing fucking Armstrong on the wing and going with that.
Marc-Antoine Fortuné up front. He's either gone or he disagrees really, really strongly.
Sorry, press the wrong button.
There we go, he's back. Yeah,
but he's done the same at Blackburn, haven't he? Blackburn are going through a lot of 8 or 9 match winless streak in Mowbray's second half of the season collapses.
That's what Mowbray do to you.
But I think that's one. So I know the comparison. We're not that many points different, are we, to what we were in the Mowbray season, the season we should have got promoted. The difference is now it's like you know what the team's going to be, which you never knew under Mowbray, which is I still think was his biggest flaw. I think it was just he continually chopping and changing and moving of players really let him down.
Well, actually, I was desperate to talk about Mowbray there, but that's not why we're here today, is it? Yeah, so Laurie, so you had bad memories about Barnsley. I always think of that as reasonably happy hunting ground for us, but it proved to be an okay game on Saturday. Were you happy with the result overall?
Yeah, I think it was a really good result. I think I definitely would have, I know we don't like talking about things like that, but I would have taken it before the game started, and I definitely would have taken it after the first 10 minutes because they were just a very good League One side, like similar to Luton in some ways, like big and strong, quick. They just pressed us really high. We didn't have any time on the ball, so we had this really nice playing surface to play on, which technically should have helped us, but we didn't really use it, or we couldn't use it because they were just all over us everywhere. We were trying to play it out from the back. Liam Kelly was even like dropping in between the centre backs sometimes to just try and get an extra man, and then Bayliss was left on his own, and the ball just kept coming back and back and back. And yeah, they scored pretty quickly. And Sterling, probably talk about him in a little bit more depth later, but in the build up to their opening goal, he'd already made a few mistakes and just looked, I don't know what it is, whether he looks like tired or just a bit like dazed or something, but he's just making errors that he hasn't made since like those first 2 or 3 games in the division when he was acclimatizing to this league. And anyhow, yeah, he had 2 opportunities to clear this ball, and then they got in behind him, pulled it back, and it was basically an open goal for them to score. And at that point, I thought this could be, 3 or 4, because they just looked like they were well up for it. Although their fans really didn't look like they were well up for it. They were maybe the worst home fans I've seen all season. That's being tough on them, just because there were quite a lot of them, and Barnsley, like historically, like quite a passionate fan base, and it was just a non-starter. They were silent throughout, apart from like the 5 seconds after they'd scored each goal. We struggled to bring any of our front players into it. Bakayoko basically didn't touch the ball in their first half. He didn't really play badly. He was so isolated. He wasn't really winning headers, and when he did, he was flicking them on to himself. So I felt a little bit sorry for him.
Do we need an entirely new football language to describe the way he plays? Because it's impossible. You can't say he doesn't ever play well, but you can't really say that he plays badly either. Like, it's gone beyond normal football parlance, it's like he's discovered a new way of playing the game, I would say.
It's because he's getting away with it at the moment because, on the whole, results have been good while he's in the team. But imagine this team with BMO in the team instead. Like, it'd be so much better at taking the pressure off our defence when we need someone to hold it up and someone who can actually hold off defenders a bit and bring people into play. He's getting away with it a little bit, and he is this kind of like funny, like cult figure. But I really don't think he's good. Second half, he did play well. He was winning headers, and I don't think Robbins does him that many favours with this system. Like, and he will run and run all day, which is nice. Like, obviously, it's nice when you can see someone's trying their heart out, but you've got to try your heart out when you're a 3 out of 10 footballer, haven't you? Because otherwise, like, it would be so awful to watch.
I don't think we would be demonstrably better with Biamu. I just think what Bakayoko does isn't what Biamu does. I think the problem is it's like they sort of equal each other out, or a combined player of both of them would be unbeatable, but that would be Drogba. I think the problem is
what are these attributes that Bakayoko has that Biamu doesn't?
He scored.
But I think he's also his movement, his forward movement is far better than Biamu.
Yeah,
Biamu played as a lone striker at the start of the season. He doesn't make forward runs, and to some extent you could say the same. Like, JCH is really proving what sort of player he could be at Bristol Rovers, but he never played like that for Cov. Maybe that's down to management, maybe that's down circumstance, but in terms of what he was doing when he was at Cov, JCH was always going back towards his own goal.
Yeah.
And I think what Bakayoko does is I think he's very attack minded. He's very much a case of get me in the box. I don't want to be facing my own goal. I'm not, and yeah, he's not that good at it. And I agree with that. But I think what he does better than the other strikers we've had this season is he makes defenders make quite a few more mistakes, and he gives space to the other players by just being more attacking, more forward thinking.
I think
he's definitely pressuring people into mistakes. I agree with that.
I loved it when it was Wilson and Leon Clark, and that I felt like Leon Clark's sort of operating position as a nominal target man was as a sort of like a target man number 10. Like, his work was done much, much deeper than Wilson's was. And I think that's what Biamu's like. And I don't mean this as a criticism. I just don't think he's a particularly dynamic player in the sense that he looks to occupy lots of different spaces on the pitch. Like, he just dominates one and makes a big difference in there, which is equally fine. But I agree with Paul. I think Bakayoko is all over the place, isn't he? He's kind of, he's trying to get in, and I think that the kind of actually his target manness is more about kind of headed attempts on goal and sort of causing trouble right in the box, and I'm not sure Biamu is necessarily the same type of player. The other thing with Biamu is I think there's a bit of an Eric Blackification of kind of, and no one adores him more than I do, especially after how much I'd vilified him at the start of last season, but that I wonder whether he wouldn't have been as good in a division up. I wonder if he, we forget that it took him until February to score a goal in the league. It's possible that he would have just not cut it. It's possible that he would have been brilliant, but that I kind of think it's a sliding doors thing of, imagine if we'd have had Biamu. I kind of think, well, maybe.
Yeah.
So stick that with your jumping lorry, you fucking know nothing dick.
Yeah, I mean,
to be fair
enough, it is. There
obviously making that comment. I've seen it's been all over Twitter a bit today.
Yeah, it has. Yeah.
And it's just, I think, as you say, you'll always get these things with players who are injured, especially players who are favoured like Biamu is. But also, a lot of Biamu was the fact he made a really good strike partnership with McNulty. I don't think the times where he was playing up front and we played the stupid 4-4-1-1 system tended to be Biamu's worst games last season. I think he was always better when McNulty was right next to him. I think whether or not he'd been able to cope, whether or not he had the mobility to cope with playing the role that Bakayoko is, I think he's, maybe we'll see it next season when Biamu hopefully comes back fully fit. But I do think in the long run we need a better striker.
Will he be good enough for the Championship though?
Yeah, better striker, Joey. Better.
Laurie, carry on from there. Make another point that we will shoot down in flames.
I wonder what Neil feels.
Where was I? Yeah, Bakayoko being anonymous but influential at the same time. What was I going to say? Yeah, I want to say a little word for Willis and Hyam, but Willis in particular was just brilliant throughout, really. Just, he won everything in the air. His pace, again, just like gets us out of so many holes. So many times you were just like, this looks like it's a really dangerous situation. Then he kind of plays a sweeper to his own mistakes sometimes.
I'm not watching. I thought you were watching it. That's what was still on.
Oh,
sorry.
Yeah, there's someone who thinks they've muted themselves and haven't, I think. Laurie, carry on, sorry.
Yeah, he was a sensational sweeper. Hyam was great. There were a few more errors in Hyam's game. Kelly, not his best first half, definitely not, but overall fine. It was a little bit stressful watching us being under that much pressure for that amount of time. And it was much more intense than the Luton pressure, I thought, when we played them. But I mean, we weathered it pretty well and we stayed in the game. And then when we managed to get our equaliser, it was a good goal. Like Mason, who's involved in both goals, he crossed in a deep ball that their defender kind of misjudged. Hawula took it down and just no pissing about, just hammered it into the roof of the net, which was a massive relief because I really wasn't entirely sure how. I think that might have been our first shot. Yeah, might have been our first shot, and it went in, which was great. And that kind of seemed to annoy them because in that little period before half time, they had us on the rocks. It was just like relentless pressure. And it was a relief when the half came to an end. But Hawula still, even with all that pressure, I think the last kick of the game was him through one-on-one with the defender. And it was kind of hard to see, and I haven't watched on the highlights yet, but hard to see whether he really had an opening. But he was trying to kind of Luke Thomas it a little bit and create a little bit of space for himself, but he wasn't able to, and the defender kind of did enough for it to go out for a goal kick. But we genuinely could have been 2-1 up somehow at half time, but that would have been asking for a little bit much. And then Barnsley just carried on when the second half started. I thought we'd come out with a little bit, sit back a little bit, maybe just do a little bit of a Man United against PSG and just trying to get to the end of the game still in it. But no, Barnsley just tore into us as soon as the second half started, and within a few minutes they'd scored, which was actually, I watched it back again, a really, really good goal. Just, they're so good at this like quick passing to feet, not even pausing to like think where the best pass is, just doing it one touch and like relying on the quickness of their movement to confuse the defense. And at League One level, like, I mean, at most levels it's hard to defend against, but at this level we were just chasing shadows, and their goal was a perfect example of that. It's just these rapid 1-2s, and then the cross comes in and they slot it in the bottom corner. And to be honest, you couldn't really be annoyed with any of our players. It was just like, what could we have done better there? Probably something, but that was just a good League One goal. But very disappointing having got ourselves back into the game. But almost that was our best period after their second goal. We started playing pretty well. Thomas came into the game a little bit more. Bayliss got a handle on things. He had been relatively anonymous in the first half. And the Luke Thomas goal is really good. Brandon Mason's on the left. I think he plays it into Bright, who takes an uncharacteristically clumsy touch, which really looks like he's lost it. And then it's weird. He does this tackle. Doesn't really seem like a tackle. It's kind of like the coming together of two players, neither of whom want to tackle each other.
I thought it was a bit of a tackle in the way that you would describe Noel Whelan's block for the Darren Huckabee goal against Man United as a tackle. He kind of just realised that he was out of control and had lost the ball, and kind of they threw his body into another player so that he could get that final touch on the ball. In the end, it was a weirdly kind of physically ingenuitive thing. That's not a word, is it? But you know what I mean? Because it kind of gave him that extra split second that he needed. But like you say, it was just, it was odd, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I want to say it was like an indication of quite how smart he can be sometimes. Because if he does see Thomas there and he thinks, I know he's not known for flying into tackles, but if he had flown into that tackle, the ball probably wouldn't have spilled to Thomas. It would have gone somewhere else. But maybe he plays the percentages there and he thinks, if I just angle my foot here, in some scenarios, it's going to spin to Thomas and he's going to be in. But maybe I'm just being extremely kind to Bright there.
I think there's an element of that. I think some players, I think some players understand how important their own kind of physicality is in terms of ball control and distribution. Does that make sense? Really good players, like someone like David Silva, maybe, who's only small, understands that the shape of his body and where he is stood is just as important as the passes that he plays and everything, in terms of the ability to keep the ball under control and to get it ultimately where he needs to go. And I think it's hard to argue that Ena Bakari's technique in that sense isn't anything other than brilliant, isn't it? We were talking the other day about a five-a-side team, and I think I possibly missed him out, and it's ludicrous because he obviously is like the pinnacle of that kind of player, isn't he? Like, he would have played FIFA Street when he was growing up, by the respect.
Yeah, he would have. Although, don't you at least need to pick up your runners in five-a-side? And I'm not sure he'd be mad into that.
I sort of think that you can always afford to have, if you've
luxury.
Yeah, you've got to have a luxury player in five-a-side that kind of. I still think, I know we're wildly off tangent here, goal hanging is a perfectly acceptable thing in a five-a-side, because kind of that's
stretches the play.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Anyway, we're not talking about five-a-side. Carry on with Barnsley.
Yeah. So this moment of fluke / Bright Ena Bakari being hyper self-conscious of his own body position results in Luke Thomas picking it up, and it's basically the position before we'd known too much about Luke Thomas. It's the position you would dream of him getting the ball in, just cutting in on his left foot inside the penalty box, and he dummies two defenders, and you can tell he's thinking about dummying a third one again, and you're just like, put your foot through that, and he does. And at the time, from behind the goal, it looked kind of like he just smashed it through the keeper's hands, and he just hit it so hard that the keeper didn't have a chance. But the highlights make it seem like it actually went complete top bins. Sorry, Paul, I know you don't like that.
I was going to say, yeah, you'd be able to hear Paul recoiling in horror there if he'd unmuted himself.
That means the top corner. And yeah, it was very good because it was at our end. Luke Thomas comes straight into the away fans, and it was a very good 30 seconds of celebrating. And yeah, and then it was like everything was up for grabs. We had a chance. Hyam missed this. Our set pieces were actually much improved throughout the whole game, and Hyam missed this header, which just seemed like just such a good chance. He was all alone, like on the edge of the 6-yard box. And I can't remember if he put it wide or he put it into the keeper's hands, but it was head in hands for the away end. After that, it was like that was our chance. Bakayoko did another. It can't be a coincidence now. I think he was closing down their defender, pounced on a loose ball, went round the keeper, but like also went round the long way, aka over the byline, the scenic route towards goal. And he's still in that phase of like people laughing a bit when he makes like mistakes, because he's like everyone's so endeared by him in some way. It's bizarre. Like, he got serenaded off at half time having not touched the ball with 20 goals Bakayoko, and he must just think, I can do no wrong in this team. Like,
he's just like, I must be playing really well.
Maybe that's why he keeps playing badly, because he thinks this is good.
Yeah, maybe.
And then there was Bakayoko did get his big chance when he sent this looping header over, and They said it was a miracle save from the keeper. If the keeper doesn't save that, he's in big trouble. Like, he has to save that. It just looks really good because he's kind of has to do a bit of a reach. But at the same time, Hyam still had time to clear one off the line. Hawula had a one-on-one as well that was a real one-on-one, but he didn't create the angle for it at all. So yeah, I think it was a relief to get out of it 2-2, but we definitely had plenty of chances to win it as well. But I think the Barnsley fans will be disappointed that they didn't win, just because how many chances they missed. Like, they had a lot of shots on goal. They weren't like, I don't know what their XG would have been, but yeah, I mean, they could have put that game to bed at certain points. Like, just before half time, just after half time, they could have got another goal as well. But we just did. I think it was just a really encouraging to see us stay in that game in the face of a team who are, like, obviously very good. And we've got a lot of young players, and we just seem to be quite good at going to these, like, difficult places and staying in the game.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Is we talked last week about this nominal idea that the running will suit us somehow because what's the word? Against what you would expect, we will be better off playing the better teams, if that makes sense. Did that bear sort of any sort of proof on Saturday? Well,
no. What I think about that is we're good at, like, this. We see that as a very good result. 2-2 away at Barnsley is a good result. 1-1 away at Luton is a good result. I don't think we're suddenly going to start beating these teams away from home. So we could easily go to Portsmouth and Sunderland and just get a point, and everyone will be like, well, that's a good result. It's obviously not, because we need to win these games because we're 6 points behind with 6 games to play, and I think we could be 10th if the team below us wins their next game in hand. So these are good results on paper, but in the circumstances, they're not really that helpful. So
they're good results if you beat Oxford.
I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Burton, and that's and that's the key. So you look at the results. You look at the teams that are coming up. Doncaster have got Bradford at the weekend, and Bradford, I think, lost 4 of the last 5. And you've got to assume that Doncaster are going to beat them. They might not, but you've got to assume they probably will. We've got Doncaster at home in a couple of weeks.
You're
less convinced we're going to beat them, and that it's already well, how you say, picking up these points against Luton and Barnsley, and they're good results. But in the grand scheme of things, it means now we basically have to beat either Sunderland or Portsmouth. We can probably only afford to lose 2 more games, probably really realistically 1 more game, because we're 6 points beyond Doncaster, but because their goal difference is 16 better than ours, we have to finish above them. We can't finish level on points. So they've got, we have to get 7 more points to them in 6 games. Well, if they win on Saturday, which they, we ought to say the things could happen, but if they do win that, then they have to lose 2 of the others. I know they've got Sunderland, but other than that, they've got pretty much they've got an easier running than us because they don't have to go to Sunderland and Portsmouth.
My advice to everybody listening would be do what I'm planning on doing, which is go to Doncaster no matter what, and just decide in your own head that the winner of that game gets into the playoffs. Even if we're 10th and 5 points outside of it at the time, if you just go with the mentality of this is all to play for, then we could have a ruddy blood good day, couldn't we?
Imagine if there is something to play for there. How many? I mean, we'd probably take 4,000 or 5,000. That would be absolutely bonkers, wouldn't it? If there was something to play for. I mean, the odds of there being something to play for are tiny, but cripes, that would be good.
The odds.
But we're going to have to score 6 on Saturday just to beat JCH, aren't we?
Yeah, because he's going to go. Well,
he scored again, didn't he?
Me and Dom talk about it, and we'll cut to that very shortly. But and I'm going to ruin a good statistic here that comes up in that, is that he scored more for Bristol City now than he has for Cov. But
they're called Bristol Rovers, by the way, mate. That's the bad era.
Yeah, but unluckily for me, only a local like you would have known that. there's that kind of thing of players scoring against their old clubs, which is, I think Jim Brown did some work on and said is just largely bollocks, except in a number of cases. Number one is Leon Clark, who gets a second mention today, who invariably, if you look at his record of scoring against previous clubs, it's immaculate, isn't it? And clearly Johnson Clark-Harris is going to be absolutely hell for leather to just murder us on his own, isn't he?
My issue with that ex-player thing is just, it's the same as coincidences. Obviously, you never remark on when you don't bump into someone you know.
It's confirmation bias, yeah.
It's a complete nonsense. Like when you play against Bristol Rovers and, I don't know, neither Agogo or JCH scores, no one will even know any of the other players. It's just complete.
But it isn't, isn't it? Because there is a level to which it's confirmation bias. There's a level to which that it's because people don't say, oh, their right back is likely to pop up and score against us. What they say is their striker is likely to score against us, and strikers invariably are likely to score because that's their job, isn't it? But with Johnson Clark-Harris is that empirically, when he played well for us this season, it was because somebody in his eyes had wronged him in some way, wasn't it? It's like he kind of, like an NBA Jam when the ball sets on fire, that's pretty much what Johnson Clark-Harris is like, isn't it? Is he just needs somebody to send him over the edge. Sometimes Doyle would do it, and that he would just go on a rampage, but that from minute one on Saturday, he's just going to be absolutely gunning for us, isn't he? Let's move this on to that, actually, because I've got Dom who's going to do a Bristol Rovers preview, and then we can pick up after that. Hi Dom, thanks for joining us.
Hiya.
First question is going to be pretty obvious. Do you think that we should be in the market for a player of the quality of Bristol Rovers striker Johnson Clark-Harris in the summer?
Yeah, he certainly has proven to be a success at Bristol Rovers, perhaps surprisingly given what we saw of him with us. Not that he was a particularly bad player, and he's certainly someone who, in the guise he was with us, that we miss, I think, a little. But, I mean, how could you have seen, what is it? It's a run of 9 goals in 11 games from the Johnson Clark-Harris that we saw with us this season and last. It just wasn't coming. And I suppose we can only sort of speculate on why that was. He was recovering from a cruciate ligament injury, I think, which he had like the year before he signed from us. So that obviously would have knocked his confidence and the momentum he had earlier in his career when it was only a big move to Rotherham. But yeah, I think also he's sort of relishing being the main man at Bristol Rovers, which he never really was here. When he first came, I think that was when there was the biggest hype around him. But even then, he was there to sort of service Mark McNulty. We never really paid much thought to him actually coming on our main striker. And then over the course of last time, we sort of signed more and more players to push him further back in the pecking order, and we seemed to discover him under the back of a sofa towards the end of the summer. And he had a little bit of a run alongside Colin Chaplin, but he was there again to serve as Colin Chaplin. He wasn't there to be the main man, and he's been brought into Bristol Rovers to be the main man. Their manager, Graham Coughlin, was the assistant manager at Southend when he had a loan spell there early in his career. And Graham Coughlin basically said, I like what I saw there, and I think you should be our main striker, which has been a big issue for Bristol Rovers this season because they sold their number one striker last season, Ellis Harris, to Ipswich Town. So they were really badly missing a goal scorer, and that was why they're struggling this season. Had a number of really good performances, or decent enough performances, but just weren't putting the ball in the back of the net. Had strikers like Tom Nichols, who has barely scored over the past 2-3 years. He just has no confidence at all in front of goal. And then they've started Johnson Clark-Harris into the side, and that's really made the difference, although they are now on the run at the moment of their winners in their past 4 games.
I would like to pause for a moment that even by your standards, knowing who Southend's manager was, Southend's assistant manager was, whilst Johnson Clark-Harris was on loan there for all 3 games he was there, is stunning. Secondly, the little fact I don't know if you're aware of, he's already got more goals for Bristol Rovers than he ever did for Coventry City.
Yeah, he's one of the top 10 goal scorers in the division now. If you add in the goals he scored for the rest of the season, but yeah, it's an incredible run for him, and he's sort of doing the things he wasn't really doing here. Aside from just literally putting the ball in the net, just remember sort of every 2 or 3 games he'd just try a pile driver from like 25, 30 yards on his left foot, which would just balloon over the goal. Well, he scored 2 of those goals in successive games. So yeah, it's just one of those really where you put one player in a shirt and it doesn't work out, and you put him in a different shirt and things are different.
He just looks like David McGoldrick at the minute. Like he's just sort of capable of anything. Anyway, they are more than a one-man team, aren't they? Or are they?
Well, they do have some pretty decent players, especially in central midfield, which is partially why I don't really know why they signed Abu Gogol, who has actually played a role in their upturn in form, but they weren't exactly lacking in central midfield. They've got Ed Upson, who I really liked at MK Dons, and Yeovil, who's a guy who can sit in front of the defence, very good passer of the ball, can get stuck in as well, and has got some goals in his game. Then you've got Chris Lyons, who's a very experienced midfielder, excellent set-piece taker, just a very good technical player, very good left foot, who's sort of a bit of a, what do you describe, a stalwart of the sides, someone they sort of really turn to in times of need. They've got Ollie Clark, who came through their academy, who's a box-to-box midfielder, and Liam Sercombe as well, who's another very good League One midfielder, more of an attacking midfielder, somewhere between what you describe as sort of your typical box-to-box player and a number 10, and he's kind of struggled to find a regular starting role in the side, especially with all those other central midfielders, but just a very good technical player. He's got some very good goals in his locker. And then they've got in central defence Tom Lockyer, who's a regular in Wales squads, and in goal Jack Bonham, who's a very good shot stopper, who's sort of rising up from the game on loan from Brentford, and it's possibly someone we might be taking a look at should Burge leave over the summer. Sort of fits kind of profile, sort of young and upcoming-ish kind of keeper. So yeah, that's their squad in a nutshell.
And how fearful of them overall should we be?
I mean, really, you just think with that sort of Johnson, Clark, Harris factor, it's what everyone's going to be focusing on. Even when we sold him, you just see that fixture upcoming, you're just like, well, it seems like quite an obvious thing that would happen to us. Or I suppose most fans of any club think that. But yeah, I am pretty convinced we're going to lose this. But yeah, it just seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment where we're struggling at home, and especially against teams who are low down in the division are coming there to sort of defend against us. So say probably an area where they're weak, where they were really exploited against Doncaster last week when they lost 4-1, is in wide areas. They don't really have any natural wide players. So if we're going to get any joy in this game, we're going to try and use the flanks as well as we can.
Right, good stuff. Speak to you next week.
All right, speak to you then.
Thanks, Dom. Right, okay. Any final thoughts on Barnsley, or are we going to do some questions?
No, I don't think so.
That sounds like questions. First off, hi to Kieran in China, who asked us a question that actually is perfect for you two. He says, I'd like to know the response to the question, would you be sky blue without anyone that influenced you? And I know for a fact that you two have no other connection to the city other than through people. That's right, isn't it? Paul, do you want to start?
What was the question? Would I support Coventry City if I wasn't forced to by my mother?
Yeah, I'd like to. Would you be sky blue without anyone that influenced you? So would you have been a Cov fan had it have not been for the intervention of a human being?
Almost impossible to say. Probably not.
Didn't you grow up in Studley? It wasn't surely not a Coventry City hotbed.
No, everyone there supported, either Villa or started off supporting Liverpool and ended up supporting Birmingham. But
so it's not that impossible to say then, isn't it?
No, I mean, but okay, no, I probably wouldn't support Cov unless I was taken as a kid to watch them by my mom. I suppose is the answer then. Yes, I was forced as a child to support them, as I'm now doing with my own children.
Way to suck the joy out of that question. That could have been, it was Mother's Day on Sunday. You could have said, "Oh, thanks, Mum, for leading me on the path."
Go back on mute.
Yeah.
Leading on the path to misery.
Yeah. Laurie, what's your story?
Mine, I wasn't even forced to. I think I was just trying to engage my dad in some form of conversation after years of silence. And I was desperate to go and see Premiership football from Bristol, mind you. And he was like, "Oh, the closest team is Coventry." And obviously now I know that's a complete lie. Southampton would have been much closer and a better choice. He had some like spurious connection that his like parents had bought their house off our old chairman, some chairman who sold concrete garages to make money. I don't know which one that was. And yeah, so the answer is I definitely would not ever have supported Coventry if it wasn't for that one fateful decision that I took a lot too seriously.
Would you change it?
Would I change it?
Not like, not, defer and change the team that you support, but would you, if kind of roll back the clock and not have had to support us, or are you happy with your lot?
What I probably would have done is picked just had a bit of think about it and be like, I'll probably spend most of my life living in London. Why can't I just pick a team in London to support, like Palace or maybe not Leyton Orient, but
Fulham?
Just definitely not Fulham. Just someone a little bit more accessible.
Why not? Definitely not Fulham. You seem like the sort of twee sort of thing that would go and watch.
You've
Fulham.
said a lot of rude things to me, Joey, but saying that I suit being a Fulham fan really gets my goat.
Yeah?
They're rubbish, aren't they? Just their fan base seems just a bit like soft. I know we're not hard nuts, but like we've got a bit of an edge. Not me, but us as the collective.
I think you've got to be careful with this, but I do think especially our away support is very good, isn't it?
Oh, that is worth mentioning that on Saturday, just like Peterborough, it was very loud and just a great turnout. I think you're at your peak away following between about 1,200 and 2,000, just because it's not too dilute. That's like all the real nutters and a few like casual fans, but enough to like make some really good noise.
Obviously, nobody would have chosen to move to Northampton, but if there is, if you kind of every cloud has a silver lining. I'm not. Oh God, people are going to write it in and say, you know what I mean. Actually, the power that gave to our away support was massive, wasn't it? Because all of a sudden people started turning up in numbers, and then they kind of kept going, and it really galvanised and strengthened. And actually, every opportunity we've had to sort of be big away support in the last sort of 5, 6, 7 years or so, 10,000 people to Milton Keynes and the 2 Wembley visits where we've completely dwarfed the opposition. The amount of times last season where there was more away fans in the ground than there was home fans and everything. It's been really good to kind of, even though it's League 2 level or wherever it is, it's been really good to sort of stomp about in big numbers and kind of make yourself known, isn't it?
No, really fun. Yeah, I think that's one of my favourite things of being a Cov fan. Just having that away following. We're not like a giant, are we? But it's just nice to be a big fish, kind of, in a relatively middling pond.
In a sort of way, it's a little bit sad, isn't it? Because it does sort of make you think, God, we really should be a lot higher than this. But anyway, let's not wallow. Simon Roberts on Twitter says, against Barnsley, big backer. He says backer. I'm going for big backer boy, obviously. Successfully chased down and intercepted a back pass, then managed to fluff it and fall over the advertising hoardings. I think this combination of brilliance and comical ineptitude is the best example of pure backer. He says, what are your best examples? Can anyone else? I mean, obviously the goal against Fleetwood has got to be up there in terms of how do you explain this man?
It was the one where he should have gone through one-on-one.
And just fell over instead.
Yeah, because you talk, as we were saying earlier, I don't think Biami would have made that run. If you watch it, it's in between the 2 centre-backs. It's the perfect striker's run. And then he touched the ball.
I think it's
what I love about that moment as well is that it's it's obvious he can't do more than one thing at once. Like his brain's running way quicker than his body can manage to keep up with, and he's just like run, 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 run. Oh no, I forgot about my feet. They've tripped each other over. Oh no, I know I can't do both those things at the same time. Which
it's only just popped into my head now, but we've got that kid David Bremang or Bremang, or I don't know how to pronounce it, in our youth team. I saw Robin's comment on him a couple of months ago and say, he only joined the youth team sort of fairly recently. He's a really big physical boy, but that he has got a lot to learn in terms of playing football. But his physicality will mark him out. So I do wonder whether he went to Robins afterwards and was just like, have I got a lot to learn? Isn't your first choice striker basically exactly what you've described about me? He'll be like, listen, you've got a lot to learn. Abadoo, come and shadow this boy and show him how to play football. Yeah. Right, what next then? So, Dan McGranahan leading does this team with Biamu instead of Baka leading the line, get into the playoffs. We're going to ask for one-word answers here. Joey C on Twitter says, Liam Kelly is the best central midfielder we've had since... Laurie?
Michael Doyle.
Paul?
He's not even the best central midfielder we currently have.
I was going to say, since Tom Bayliss.
Yeah, or it's like, what a strange question.
I know what he means, though.
I think he's been really good this season, hasn't he? Yeah.
He's made that role his own. We thought there was only a Michael Doyle-shaped hole in that centre midfield, and now Liam Kelly... I mean, we all knew there was something better out there, but Liam Kelly's made it quite clear. There it is.
I think he's been a really bright spot of this season, because actually it's only a little bit like Biamu last season, where kind of he's really sort of moved on a lot in the second half of the season. But I think when we look into next season, Kelly forms a massive part of that team, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question, both of you. Dujon Sterling will go back to Chelsea, I expect, next summer. To what extent do you just tell Grimmer now, we're sorry, but you'll be our first choice right back in League One next season?
I don't think you do you?
Well, why? Because it's too late to turn him round, or because you think he's not good enough,
I mean, it's difficult. I mean, he's played more than you think, and most of the time when he's played, we've lost. Now, that's not to say that he's a bad player. I just think I think there was always question marks over how good he was going to be in League One, and I just think there are better right backs out there. I know there's probably less lovable right backs out there for all, like you see, is a really nice guy, but I just think Sterling's proven that. The way I describe it at the moment is Mason seems to get man of the match quite a lot, and he's basically doing what Grimmer did last season, where he runs up and down the pitch a lot and he puts in a couple of average balls a game. But because he's doing it in the second half and we're sort of chasing games, the fact that he's got no end product, but the fact he runs up and down a lot makes him look slightly better than he actually is. If he had any end product,
they did both lead to goals on Saturday. Just going to put that in
there. Yeah. I mean, yeah. They did, but there's been other times where they haven't led to goals. He's created far fewer than Sterling has, and Sterling, has stepped it up this season when it's come to, he's created 9 assists. He got direct assists.
Really? Wow.
Like that, or 8. It's
I think there's something got to be said just quickly on the subject of kind of Mason and Grimmer and whatever else, of actually that. Part of being that modern fullback is about having an engine that gets you up and down that I think no other position on the pitch quite so heavily relies upon. And I know what you're saying about kind of the end product not being perfect, but I do think that is ever so slightly kind of picky about a player that literally never gets caught out of position. And I think Grimmer had got a bit of that, where actually that's magnificent that Grimmer last season was, end product or no, was able to constantly get up and down the pitch, and Mason does it as well. That is some incredible level of fitness to be able to not keep getting caught out of position.
Isn't it funny thinking about Stokes now compared to the fullbacks we've been watching for the past year, where Stokes, not to slag him off, but just like he would get to the halfway line and then start just like panicking, whether it's because the manager had told him not to go any further or because he realised he might have to use both feet. Like the difference in dynamism between Sterling and Mason and even Junior Brown and then Chris Stokes, like it's just interesting that Chris Stokes did so well in that team, the Mowbray, Armstrong and Madison team, isn't it? Like, or kind of got by when he was so palpably at a much lower level.
Yeah, quite. Matt Swindles, friend of the show, Matt Swindles asks, could vocal support make a difference to the players at the Rico? It certainly worked at Barnsley. Paul?
Yeah. Yeah, if you've got 20,000 people singing, I just think, as you said earlier, I think the away dances and the away atmosphere, but also, by the sounds of it, we were outplayed for periods and we played really well for periods. I think we're better against teams who give us quite a bit of space and come on to us. The problem is at home, teams close us down. I don't think it's the fans sang all the time. I don't think it's going to make that much difference. It'd be better to play in a nicer atmosphere, but the atmosphere at the Rico's always been a bit odd. Our home form since we've moved to the Rico has been, in fact, our home form for the entirety of my life has always been pretty average. I mean, this season is, if anything, it's our home form which has badly let us down, hasn't it? We've lost too many games at home. We're not Doncaster, I think, are in the top 6 for home form, which is why they're in the top 6. I think we're about 12th or something. And I don't think it's atmosphere. I think we're not very good in those circumstances.
Laurie, let me ask you a question. You're a gentleman who goes to a lot of home and away games. I think I know the answer to it, but which do you prefer?
Away games.
I mean, is there even a contest, or is it just as simple as away games?
No, just as simple as that. Like, I always want to watch Cov, but I mean, going to the Rico is just not that appealing a prospect. And I just love away games. But my main contention with that is, much as I agree the atmosphere of the Rico is a bit strange, you compare it to the home atmospheres of most of the grounds we go to this year.
It's all about the same.
The home support is actually more vocal at the Rico than I'd say 70-80% of the stadiums in this league. Like, that corner does a really good job of like creating some noise. Obviously, the negativity spreads through the ground quite quickly, which I don't know how much that affects other teams because I don't go every week. But I think overall, in terms of like songs and noise, the Rico is definitely good in this league. But we've all seen it when it goes badly, and those are the things you remember more often, I think.
But that was going to be my point, is actually I kind of think part of the thing of lamenting our home support compared to our away support is, one, the sort of the away fans, I think, draws a section of people who want to, one, drink, which I think leads to singing and atmosphere more anyway, and two, wants to get wrapped up in that atmosphere even if they don't drink. So I think it lends itself. But generally speaking, going away is just better than go to a home game, isn't it? And so it's more joyous and fun anyway. I think I agree with the sentiment of it, but I think it's difficult to expect the possibility of replicating the sort of atmosphere at an away game because it's just not as good, is it? The Rico is just, it's a trudge. Whereas if you go to Accrington away, then it's fun for a bit.
Sorry, one more point on that. It's just, I think it's really one of the reasons I would say being an away fan who goes to Cov is so appealing. It's because under Mark Robbins, it's so rare that we completely get like blown away.
Yeah.
It just never happens. We're almost always in with a shout for the majority of the game. Even if we're not looking like scoring, it's never really 2-0, is it? Like, I can count on like one hand the amount of times we've been like really out of a game, and it just makes going away much more fun when we're not going to get smashed here no matter who we play.
But you know, I think that's a strange thing with us at full stop, is in all of my years of supporting, bear in mind how routinely shit we've been for so much of that time, we very rarely get smacked all over the place, do we?
There's been times where yeah.
But I think compared to,
even when we do, it's fun. Like Yeovil, that was fun. It was just so weird. It was almost
Tranmere
fun.
At Six Fields, where you were like, wow, we're not even playing badly and we're losing 5-1. Go on, Paul, what were you going to say?
I don't know. I've just got to look at the home and away form. I think there's 1 point difference between our home form and our away form, which does point to the fact that we've been really good away from home. I think we're the 6th best, as I said, in the division away, and at home, 6th best with 28 points, and away we're 14th best with 29, and that's 11 points behind Doncaster, and that's where we've lost it. We've lost too many home games. That is critical, isn't it? And again, we're talking about recent performances. It's been those home games, and we're going against Bristol Rovers on Sunday. Really, I think if you're most of the teams in the top 8, you're sort of probably thinking that's, or top 10, you're thinking that's got to be at least 70-30, if not 80-20 in your favour. And we're looking at going, well, it could go 50-50 with us. If Bristol Rovers score first, I think that's the most amazing thing, is you look at the performances away. Luton scored first, Barnsley scored first, obviously Charlton scored first. That's 3 of the top 5 have scored first against us, and we haven't lost any of those games. Yeah, at home, you go 1-0 behind against AFC Wimbledon. That's it. We've lost quite a lot of games this season, sloppy, bad games, 1-0 once we've gone behind. Away from home, we just seem to have a bit more about us.
Well, I feel like
that could be quite good for next season, though, couldn't it? Because if it's kind of easier to sort out your home form, isn't it, than sort out your away form? So
it's a bit easier to sort out your home form if you don't have a home and every game's away.
Well, that's that's a separate problem that we might have to talk about in a couple of weeks.
Wait, what's happening?
Well, I don't think we're in the market for talking about stuff that we don't know, but it does seem increasingly more likely from what we half know that actually it might be quite a bad outcome next season, mightn't it?
I've heard a few, just my only input on this would be that I've heard a few people say that the boycott would be less significant this time because people feel that it's not like an active choice by the club to move out of the city and they're being forced out. So do you think there'd be anything behind that we'd see less of a boycott?
I don't know whether as well that there'd be a kind of weird reverse apathy in terms of a boycott, but it also depends on where we go. At the minute we've got no idea what the options are or anything else, but it does seem possibly like we'd have to go back on our early assertion that we didn't think it would come to pass, or certainly that was what my feeling was, and increasingly it feels like actually that might be. But anyway, that's, like I say, possibly one for when more details come out and we know that to be true. But it could still very easily turn around because it's so easy to turn around. But it's just amazing to me that we would I know you shouldn't be surprised about history repeating itself, but it is astonishing that the same set of players would let the same set of circumstances come to pass when the last time it happened was such a fucking completely untenable mess. No pun intended. Anyway.
Would you take it though if we got Callum Wilson and Leon Clark back for one season?
You imagine admittedly, for the 18 games that he'd be fit, how devastating Callum Wilson would be in League One again now. We have questions from Sky Blue Hub, from at Cov1981, from Ian Heroin, all largely covered, so I'm not going to ask them explicitly. Right, anything else before we wrap up? I feel like I was going to ask something, but I've forgotten about it. No? Okay, yeah, let's wrap up then. Right, if you want to get in touch with us, at Neil Lamptey Show on Twitter, it's neillampteyshow@gmail.com on the email. Laurie, thank you very much.
No worries, mate, my pleasure.
Paul, thank you very much.
Cheers, mate.
And thank you, listener. Bye.